My bad. All right, so this is the second video in my daily video log, and again, this is for verified elite training systems, and this is just anything that kind of comes up in my day, or anything that's on my mind, any ideas or just topics that are out there in general that I just want to give my 2 cents on, or maybe I'm even at some point I know I'm going to be looking for some input from anybody who's watching. So today I actually had a very good conversation. It was actually a text conversation, but it was actually regarding Feed the Cats program and Tony Holler and all of his philosophies. Now, if you're not familiar, Tony Holler is a strict track guy, and what he preaches is that the sprints can do everything for you in the sense of developing speed, strength, and power. But these sprints must be true maximal sprinting. He also integrates like very intense maximal lactate training protocols, as well as has some a change of direction, plyometric training involved as well. So it's not like it's just the sprints. There are other things involved. But one thing that he is very against is weight room training. And his main reason that he preaches, to get away from the weight room is because it's developing slow speed strength. Now, you have to think about it this way. So if you are looking at, the forces that you produce when you sprint, right? There's data to show that during a sprint in your first 5 to 10 steps that you can produce up to about 4 times body weight, right? Now, if you're thinking about that, how many people in the weight room can move 4 times body weight on a deadlift? You're talking less than 0.5% of the population in the world, and even of elite powerlifters, that number is very small. You know what I mean? So, but the key difference is, even though it's that 4 times body weight, you got to think about the impulse. So it's basically the force times the time that you interact with the ground. So that interaction is like this, you know what I mean? And the main part is that you're trying to apply enough force to either accelerate your body weight forward, or if you're past acceleration, you're in that top end sprint, what you're trying to do is support body weight against gravity. That strength is very specific at high speeds, you know what I mean? So then if you're looking at this weight room deal, those speeds that you're at when you're sprinting, you'll never see in the weight room, right? So if you are familiar with velocity-based training, something that you'll see is, like the upper echelon of explosive strength training in VBT is 1.3 meters per second, and that's getting pretty fast for a lift. Now, if you look at just jumping, a very good elite takeoff velocity for a jump, 3 meters per second. Now, if you look at sprints, Usain Bolt's top end speed is 12 meters per second. Anybody who's running, sub 10s around 10 to 11 meters per second. And then you're, probably where most team sport athletes live that aren't professional, if you're talking college and high school, besides the guys who are running 4.3s, 4.4s, you're looking at, 9.5 to 10.5 meters per second top speed. Now, those speeds will never be reached in the weight room. So if the problem I think that Tony Holler has with the weight room ideal and how that correlates with sprint training and like training in the weight room for force is that it's slow strength. Now the problem is it's that I think the audience that he's targeting is those that believe that only slow strength weight room training without maximal speed training on the other end will yield sprint improvements. And that's where I think the misunderstanding, miscommunication is. Now, don't get me wrong, the way that he trains that fast, high velocity strength is a lot better than what most people do, and it changed my entire philosophy on sprint training. I started actually implementing his methods for my sprint training days, did it for about a year, and I have about 3 guys like that I had specifically for a period of about 7 months. Some of them who are, one of them's 23, one of them's 24 years old, previous hamstring injuries on both, and we still managed to drop their their 40 times down about 2.5 tenths over the course of that time. And for somebody who is that advanced in their training, not just that they're old, they're pretty advanced in their training, that's very significant and something that we're proud of. But at the same time, we weren't just focusing on that type of sprint training. We were also integrating other lifts. And now the key thing that I'm trying to bring up here is that I think there needs to be a balance between both. And this is where like Charlie Francis' vertical integration stuff comes in. It's about basically you want to hit all the types of strengths at once. It's just about how much of each one you're doing and when you're doing it. So you're up and down regulating certain ones. So depending on the time of year, like if you're coming close to season, you're going to do the majority of your work on that fast, high-speed sprint strength, and that way you can get more relevant training to the environment they're going to be in, and that's where you can even put the dynamical systems theory, and you can apply that, right? Early on, you're not going to do that as heavily, and what you can do is take that opportunity to build that absolute strength. So what we need to kind of look at, and something I have right here, is we got to look at the force velocity curve, okay? So if we look at the force velocity curve, what you can see on the y-axis, you have force. On the x-axis, you have velocity. So these are the different types of strength, and you can kind of ignore the percentages here, but these are the different types of strength. So basically, the higher amount of force you have, the slower you're going. Now, as you start to go down, that means you're increasing the amount of force you can produce, but you're moving at a higher velocity. Now, this chart doesn't have it on here, but about in here, right where strength speed is turning into power, that's where like the optimal amount of power you can produce, because it's at a point where you're using the most amount of force at the highest amount of speed. So what you want to do is you don't want to focus on one end or the other. So if I only focus on the weight room side, I only train this area, this red area right here, what's going to happen is this curve is going to shift to the right, but only up here. So it'll bend, right? But at the same token, what will happen if I only focus over here, that will drift off, right? This will drift off. And that's what I don't want either. I want this whole curve to move this way to the right, but that means you need to train all aspects of this. So the fact that, there's no weight room, or there's, only weight room, those type of mentalities, I think, can't be utilized anymore. It needs to be an integration of both, and it's kind of dependent on the sport. So if I'm dealing with athletes that are playing a contact sport, you better believe that I'm lifting just because I want them to have resilient tissue. You know what I mean? I want them to be able to prevent injury through building strength. Yes, the sprints will build strength, but a very specific type of strength at high speeds. You know what I mean? So like something that kind of comes to mind is like hamstring strength at that top end speed. Like that type of strength is really specific and needed. But at the same time, like if I have a football or rugby player and their upper bodies aren't strong, like their upper bodies aren't able to handle like the blow of contact, because we haven't done any type of upper body training, I'm not a fan of that. Yeah, so, what I see is that there needs to be a balance between both. And I think depending on the time of year and the situation and the person that you have, like you have people who are just geared to the weight room. You know what I mean? That's their upbringing. That's what they like. That's how you get buy-in. You know what I mean? Like if they, enjoy doing power training of speed squat dynamic effort method, like let's do it. If they enjoy their power type of training as like jumping efforts with different types of loads and different types of modes, like let's do it. You know what I mean? But that's where the monitoring program comes in. You know what I mean? You need to monitor your athletes for speed, power, strength, whatever those key performance indicators are. You need to monitor those so that you can know what's working for that person. So I thought that was just kind of like an interesting conversation and kind of like an interesting take on, Tony Holler's philosophy and kind of where I stand in it. So if you got any questions, let me know. DM me, comment section, put something in the comment section. I would love to hear what you have to say. Have a good night.